Yeah, that leads me to my next question, which is about a very popular model of psychotherapy. Everybody seems to know or ask about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which for people who may not know, really came into vogue during, I believe, I want to say the Nixon administration, when managed care for insurance companies first started coming onto the scene. And because it became an evidence-based psychotherapy, it was adopted by these managed care providers as kind of a gold standard. And so it still, I think, is sort of a king of the standard, or provides these standards for psychotherapy. In my experience, sort of unfortunately, although many therapies are being integrated right now, and mindfulness based is sort of now being added on to almost every psychotherapy that's out there. But yours, IFS and self-leadership is what you call a constraint releasing psychotherapy. So can you say how that's different from, say, CBT?
Well, there are many, many differences from CBT, but the constraint releasing approach came from recognizing something we haven't talked about yet, which is that just beneath the surface of these parts, there's a state I call the self with a capital S that is in everybody. It's our essence. Talk about spirituality. It's really moved me in a much more spiritual direction than I ever was when I started this journey. And that self contains these wonderful qualities, what we call the 8 C's of self-leadership, which include curiosity, calm, confidence, compassion, and then clarity, creativity, courage, and connectedness. And that I just stumbled onto because my background as a family therapist. I was trying to get conversations going between my client and their parts that similar to what I might do in a family session. And there were parts that were interfering all the time, and I would ask them to step back, and now you step back, get that part to step back. And as I did that, my client would suddenly change in a dramatic way. Whereas earlier they'd been really angry or really terrified, and they got that part to open space inside. It was like it released this other person who could take over the session and knew how to be with these parts in a healing way. And if I was doing a couple session and I could get that person to come out, they would know how to relate to their partner in a healing way. And when I ask clients, now what part of you is that? They'd say, that's not really a part like these others, that's myself. And so after almost 40 years of doing this, and people now, thousands of people doing it all over the world, we can safely say that that self is in everybody, is just beneath the surface. And when it does come forward, is released, constraints are released, it knows how to heal. It just does. And so in contrast to so many other therapies and thoughts about the world, about how human nature, which say that humans are basically, they have a lot of primitive impulses that civilization kind of crusts over.
That we have to either atone for or repent, maybe, going back in religious systems or
like CBT, you have to correct.
Yeah.
You have to correct these irrational thoughts.
Right.
That are coming from there. But Freud had the libido, which was full of these scary impulses and so on and so on. So most theories have gone there. And so in contrast to all of that, this says, if you can create the right conditions where parts feel like it's safe to open that space, then you're releasing the constraints that are keeping your client from healing themselves. In contrast to things like CBT or other kinds of therapies where the therapist has to give the client what they're missing. It's a deficit-based model.
Right.
There's some kind of lack of insight or some kind of lack of inner dialogue.
So let me just summarize what you said, because I think it's so important for people to get this part, that as you were well known as, in fact, as a family therapist. So you would work with multiple people in the room at the same time, kind of a crowd. right?
Right.
So you'd have a group of people, a family, at least a mother and a father, or a husband and wife, or partners. And when they start talking at the same time, it's just sort of common sense. I mean, but this is actually a very important point of family therapy, is that the therapist creates boundaries and says, wait a minute, I can't hear you both. One of you speak, you be
Yeah,
quiet. It's your turn, something like that.
that's right.
And, and you had this idea that, wait a minute, even when you're sitting with a person by herself or himself, you still have to do that with those
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, because you'd have lots of parts talking. Okay, get that one to step back, get that one to open space, get that one, let's hear from this one. And then the person who comes out to hear from this one is quite different from those parts that were polarized with the one you're trying to get to know.
Right.